your feedback in the sessions. We've now got sort of 20 minutes to go through the feedback that we received. So I'm going to hand over. Sarah, do you want to cover off some of the key points from your session?
Yep. So some of the key points we had was some of the feedback was to have a quality manager was a real benefit as well. To have that key focus on managing quality was really helpful. So there was a lot of comments about that. Also, because the MaPS standard is more it's live, it's monthly now, and it's live, so that's a real benefit compared to where we were with DAPA. So that's definitely been welcomed. Also recognition that it's now focused a bit more impact on the customer. So that's whereas we know DAPA was quite process, but this is very much on the customer, so that's really helpful. The burden, the administration burden, that seems to be much less, and less advisors stressed on, actually doing the work, but also when the feedback comes in. So that seems to be much more positive than it was before. But one of the asks has been that we still have a look at the confirmation advice letter, because we still feel that that's still not where it needs to be. So that it's, whether it's fit for purpose. So I said I'd take that away as well. But no, all in all, really good feedback from this group.
Interestingly, Breakout Room 1 focused also on confirmation of advice letters. So thankfully there was positive to hear around our move to more customer impact focused outcomes. So that's really, really pleased to hear. But also that customer confirmation of advice letters continue to be one of the challenging parts. I was really pleased to hear that, it's now more and more clear that direction of travel is not being driven by MaPS, and we are definitely not there to drive the longer letters where they are not necessary. But it was acknowledged that for some advisors or organisations, they still don't know how much more they can change. So getting the right amount of advice and evidence on a letter to be tailored to the customer, to give them what is almost the minimum information that they need to have to take action, can still seem really long. So definitely some things for us to take away, Sarah, and to work with other organisations, and particularly feed into our review with the FCA on how can we inform what letters look like. I think there was still some sort of suggestions around minimum requirements for letters, and I know we've been very conscious not to provide too much guidance where it may contradict what's in regulation. And so something for us, I think, to look at our guidance moving forward, and particularly look at some of the examples of really good practice we've seen and how we can and share them more widely. So that was definitely some of the themes. We did just get into a topic on mental health breathing space, and then we ran out of time on how we've changed our approach there and given what's going on. And thankfully I had Erica on our call to be able to handle those. But yeah, typically our discussion points were on confirmation advice as well. So it seems quite consistent. Thank you, Sarah. Was there anything else on yours?
No, that's it.
Great, thank you. Carol, over to you.
Struggling to get the mic up then. So I won't feed back absolutely everything, but I'm going to caveat that with that these do not take precedence over anything that's been fed back. So there will be things additional things in the notes. So I certainly got a sense that the challenges that we're facing now are far less, and they are better challenges that we're facing than we had previously. So operating with the customer facing standards for those that are working to those is working better. But there are some challenges around the kind of aligning them properly with the internal quality assurance framework. So there are still some challenges there where they don't quite sit directly with and there are additional things in the local frameworks that they're assessing against, which is creating one or two challenges. There is also feedback around with the telephone interventions, the fact that we are having to look at limiting how long calls are to be able to assess them. It's felt that there are some of the best work is reflected in those longer cases. So that is a little bit of a challenge. There was something put forward, a question around whether we will be considering aligning the MaPS standards with the other series of standards that organisations are currently required to meet, sort of the advice quality framework, the advice quality standards, consumer duty, now that that's coming in, those sorts of things, whether we will look to try and align some of that in the future. There was a suggestion that they'd like to see more focus on the soft skills of advisors, not just the technical skills of advisors, if that was brought into the quality framework. And the more opportunity for feedback from advisors. There wasn't specifically a proposal on how, but more opportunity for advisors to feed in to the future developments. So, and David's got the main notes, I've got half notes, so I don't want to go any further in case I don't say something correctly, but those were some of the key things from us.
Fab, Carol, thank you. We also actually discussed something similar on the alignment to CONC and the MaPS standards, and I mentioned in our group, which I'll sort of mention here again, is that we, as part of the review we are doing with the FCA, have flagged that any future changes to either the standards or to CONC, we need to try and ensure they either are aligned or they don't contradict each other, because we are conscious that there are almost so many different pieces by the regulation or standards or requirements that organisations are having to meet, and where possible we want to make that streamlined as possible. We do not want organisations to have to jump through additional hoops if it's not necessary. So it has been flagged as part of our review that any potential changes that may come about to those standards will need to be considered in any future iterations of CONC that come through. But definitely take on board the points around the other quality frameworks, and I think those that are in the devolved governments, there is the Scottish national standards as well for those that are in Scotland. So it is just a huge volume of standards that are out there, and definitely something for us to factor into future approaches. So thank you very much, Carol.
Sorry, there was just one final point very quick about the longevity of the customer journey, and that actually we assessed quite early on in that, and we ought to give some thought to how we assess right through to outcome and the quality of the experience beyond just the debt advice reaching the debt solution.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the challenges for us with our remit, isn't it, in terms of we fund the initial advice interaction rather than the end-to-end journey for some customers, depending on the organisation you work with. And that has always been one of our challenges around case eligibility, hasn't it, in terms of what is an eligible case for us to mark and what isn't. Definitely something for us to take away, though, Carol, I think, in our future approach to customer-facing testing. So it's great to hear that that's feedback coming through, because I know we've had the discussion about it, haven't we, internally? So
yeah,
really good. Thank you. I think it's now over to Catherine.
Oh. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Cool. Sorry, my Teams is on one this morning, so it's been a bit. I've been blessed to have got so far through this session without any problems. So funnily enough, we actually started our discussions on outcomes. So kind of following on quite nicely from what Carol's just kind of mentioned there. And there was felt that we should be looking, maybe not necessarily MaPS, but lots of organisations themselves are looking to have that outcomes measurement go through as long as the journey as possible. And we saw some really good examples of how they were doing that, and actually with some kind of measuring potential, so where there's a reasonable assumption that they're going to go through and get that outcome, but it might not be known for definite, but also achieved outcomes that are known. So that was really interesting, and there's some stuff going on that's already weaving that throughout internal quality assurance. There was a reflection that we need to be kind of clear on the distinction between the types and definitions of outcomes. So are we talking about customer well-being, understanding? Are we talking about the debt solution, kind of the more kind of classic outcomes as how it's been measured, or something else, you know, customer satisfaction, for example. So it was felt that outcomes measurement is, you know, is key, but there's probably work to be done there to make sure we're all talking in the same ways about outcomes and have a shared understanding. In terms of how it's woven out through internal QA, really good examples of how actually positive outcomes being achieved is woven through that IVR process and is being used to provide good feedback for advisors and kind of show the positive impact that their advice has been having. So that's kind of been a nice layer of the IVR process that one organisation talked to, which I thought was really nice. We also talked about how the kind of IVR process is being used as a learning and development tool for advisors, and how that's kind of a nice add-on basis where you're looking at what's the minimum expectations, what's the good practice, and how can that be kind of woven onto the journey that the advisor's going on with their own development. It was mentioned that for IVRs, they often cover maybe a wider range of interactions than are currently falling within the eligibility criteria for the customer-facing assessment. So thankfully had some MaPS colleagues in the call close to some of those conversations, and some of that's kind of already been recognised, and is an internal discussion around how do we assess compliance of the standards for those interactions that might not got through all the way through to fall within the eligibility criteria for the customer-facing assessment process. So that was a really useful observation. Linked to the IVRs, there was also some feedback that there still is some feelings that kind of MaPS might be quite influential in the IVR process, and kind of some of those difficulties that advisors might be feeling from a nitpicking perspective in the IVR processes. But it's very clear that it is coming out of those internal QA mechanisms, so it isn't necessarily being driven by MaPS, but that's possibly is still a perception that's held in the front line. So we did talk about, is there anything we could improve in terms of our advisor communications? So no specific improvements were identified, but it's felt that it is important that we make sure that the content that's relevant to the advisors is really easy to find when we do make any further changes to the quality website. So a useful takeaway for us here at MaPS. And then my final kind of readout, and I thought this one was a really interesting one, is that it's felt that it would be really beneficial to have greater sharing of data insights across the wider sector. So what are we seeing happening in debt? What are we seeing happening in insolvency services? Where are the kind of barriers? Where are the gaps? And actually maybe we're not as transparent with wider data sharing as a sector as we could be, and that could have real benefits for improving the customer journey overall for kind of the wider debt ecosystem. So I thought that was a really useful takeaway.
Fab, thank you, Catherine. That's really, yeah, definitely a useful takeaway, that one. And I think we've also talked internally about where we've seen good practice in either debt or money guidance. How can we share that in pension guidance or pension wise, or vice versa? If we've seen really good practice, how can we bring all the different services where actually the customer demographic is relatively similar for some of them together to say this is what we're seeing? So, but I think the insolvency service point's a really good one, particularly with DROs. Yeah, let's take that away. I know we've got colleagues from the debt team here, so to see how we can feed into any of the working groups on that. That's really, really helpful. Thank you so much to everyone. I'm conscious we're coming to the end of it. We do have 7 minutes left. Is there any? I am going to open the floor to questions, which I may regret doing, but no, I'm just joking. But is there any questions that anyone has in the last 7 minutes of the session, or any sort of additional feedback that anyone wants to give? And I'll sort of open that up. No. Okay, well, I want to just thank everybody for your time today to attend the session. This has been an incredible turnout, the number of people we've had join us, over 85 people, so I'm really pleased. We are going to keep trying to run more frequent sessions to update you on our progress as we move through this, and we will be providing some updates following the FCA review later at the end of this year, when we receive the outcomes and recommendations. If there is anything that you would like to hear more from us, please do fill it in on the survey. Sarah is going to put a link in the chat for the survey for you to complete. I think she's just done it actually. So please do fill that in, send it in to us. We do take on board the feedback, and we do try and factor it into our future engagement approach. But if there is nothing else, also thank you so much to the team who facilitated this and helped support. It goes without saying it's quite a big job when there's this number of volume of people attending. But if there's no outstanding questions, I'll give everyone 5 minutes back. It's unheard of for me to finish an event on time. But thank you very much, everybody.
Cheers, Natasha. Thank you. Cheers.